Good afternoon, Rotarians. It's Thursday again. And so they fly by, don't they? Well, I'm so glad you're here. We've got a full room. I'm excited to see people are back from spring break. And we're going to get started. We've got a full agenda today. We're going to move through it quickly. Have a good time. So let's begin with saying the four-way test of what we think, say, or do. Is this true? Is it fair? You may have a seat. And the fun leader today is Bill Burke.
Okay. God bless America. We go. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her, right guide through the night with the light from above. From the mountain to the prairie, to the ocean, white with gold. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Good job.
I pledge to this.
Now that it's spring and everybody's mowing their yards again, sometimes you'll see a patch of clover. I haven't found a four-leaf clover in a long time, but I was just go ahead. I'm looking over a four-leaf clover. Okay. I'm looking over a four-leaf clover that I looked before. One leaf is sunshine, the second is rain, third is the roses that grow in the lane. No leaf waiting, the one remaining is somebody I adore. I'm looking over the four-leaf clover that I overlooked before.
Hey, now here comes out unexpectedly, some of our substitute sergeant at arms is Frank.
Opening Rotary, Paul. Members of the cats, Albert Rose as guest.
Hello, Rotarians, join me in welcoming my lovely bride, Barbara. Actually, our anniversary is 19 years.
Two guests.
We welcome my two guests, Kelly Rideout and her husband Greg. Kelly has been once. Husband Greg is new to us today. They are from Little Rock. They need to be close to their children, and Greg has a business, medical business that sells to optometry and ophthalmology.
Please pray in your faith and devotion as I pray. As we gather here today as members of Rotary, we pray that we are ever mindful of opportunities to render our service to fellow citizens and our community, keeping in mind always the enduring values of life, exerting our efforts in those areas and those things upon which future generations can build with confidence. Let us continue to strive to make the world a better place. Amen.
Thank you so much. All right, it's at this time I have a pleasure to introduce our newest member. Andrew is sponsored by Lloyd Swope, and I didn't warn you, but I'm going to give you the chance to talk about yourself right now if you like. Here.
Hey everyone, I'm Andrew Zerborg. Happy to be here and excited to be a new member and get to know each and every one of you here. Just a little bit about myself. I work at Legacy National Bank and I've been there for about 14 years now. So long time. My wife and I and our one-year-old daughter, we live in Fayetteville. I'm originally from Springdale. So yeah, excited to be here. Thank you.
Okay. Going to free health care. And it's at this time, let's do some history. Welcome, Rotary.
Can we put that right there? Well, my pitch today has to do with classifications. That is one of the primary bases for the founding of Rotary Club. We all know that Paul Harris was an attorney and he was kind of lost in Chicago, and he went and searched around, went and found him a coal dealer and an engineer and all kinds of business people. And that's how Rotary got started. I have a little list of our charter members, and I only have 13 on my list, but they have their classifications. Some of them are kind of interesting. We know Henry Tovey was a music guy, so he lists piano. Jay Fulbright, you may have heard of him. He was men's furnishings. John Futrell was the only one that listed and said he was University of Arkansas. Leland Bryant was automobile. That eventually became Lewis Ford. Hayden McRoy, I thought that was kind of interesting from the bank. It says he's the, where is that? Cold storage. Who knows? Back in 2000, whatever, 25 or 26 years ago, I had the privilege of being president of this club. So I had a kind of interest to go back and see what kind of classifications we had. First of all, we had 180 members back then. We met at the Hilton Hotel. It was a big club back then. 12 years after the time of enlightenment, that's when the women came. We got enlightened. 12 years later, we had 29 women in the club, which was about 16% of our membership. And most of them are active and made really good Rotarians. We were glad to have them. There was 25 people who directly worked for the universities, the professors, deans, that sort of thing. That made up about 15% of the club. 24 lawyers, only 24 lawyers. Can you believe it? That includes the lawyers, the judges, the law school people. And out of that group, by the way, I think we did pretty well. We ended up with 6 circuit judges and 1 Supreme Court justice. So we did pretty good out of that bunch. A lot of them are still here today and active in our club, by the way. We had 18 bankers and financial services sort of people, medical health people, doctors, surgeons, people who worked in medical offices, 16. Hey, do we I don't even know if we have any pastors here today, even in our club. Well, we had 3 pastors. We had Rhett Baird from the Unitarian Church. Jim Huffman was non-denominational. He was the president of this club. And Jerry Mitchell from First Baptist. So we had some ministers there. Go out and get us some. We can use them. We had 4 regular military people who had retired and came back for second careers here, and they all made good Rotarians too. Max Barron, Jim Buckner, Doug Pritchard, and Guy Brown. We had lots of other retail sales, lots of other people, architects, city government people, public schools, all that. Anyway, I want to thank each of you for being here and sharing your classification with us each day so we can carry out the principles of Rotary. I came in as a dry cleaner, 1967. 6 years later, I changed it over to lawyer. Listen, now I'm 50 years later. I think what I need to do is get a new classification, and I hope it doesn't offend some of you more mature guys, like Dale Green and Lloyd Schwab. I want a new classification called Club Grandfather.
Oh, chatty. We'll do birthdays.
All right, so April birthdays, we have Max Barrett, April 2nd. Jack Butt, April 23rd, Bob Estes, April 6th, Will Goodson, April 10th, Brad Hammond, April 21st, Priscilla Cumpy, April 12th, Joe Rawson, April 17th, James Norman, April 27th, Harrison Pittman, April 3rd, Katie Sager, April 6th, and Ron Warren, April 30th. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Rotary. Happy birthday to you.
Other updates, fellowship committee, we're gonna meet here next Thursday after the meeting. We had 6 applications, and as of the last few minutes, that number has gone up to 8. I've been reading the applications, they're all great kids, so it's gonna be a tough decision for us to decide which 2 will be lucky recipients of the Royal Roll Scholarship and the Lewis Evans Scholarship. One other thing, it's the dining at the dark on your table, they have a QR code. Use your phone and use your camera to point that QR code and take you directly to this event. It just takes, thanks.
Okay. All right, battle for the paddle is coming up. Make sure your calendar is clear and protected so that you can come and see what's going on and be part of this fun event, April 18th and 19th. Yes. Okay, we're filling flight bags, 120 bags or something. Yeah, knock that out easily, few bags. So please stay a little bit late if you can today. Right, all right, so we had, I know this is the past, it just happened, and we had our first project for SOAR after school program. Emily was unable to make it today and speak about this. I have to speak about next week. How about that? Oh, is somebody here that was there? Tell, yeah, tell us what happened.
We had a really great night. The SOAR after school program, I really was not as familiar with it. I had heard about it. But it provides free daycare for families who are possibly working, making, their income, but doesn't allow for them to pay kids to go to after school program. So they have partnered with 2 schools in Rogers, 3 schools in Springdale. And it's on a first come, first served basis. They take 100 kids from school and they teach these kids leadership skills, a lot of soft skills that kids aren't really learning, or, quite frankly, adults could go to. So yes, communication was a key thing. So tomorrow there's an event. I can't remember what it's called, but we put together buttons that all these kids are gonna have, and then there's sort cards for the event that they're gonna do. So circle the Zoom, and they sit in a circle, and adults, teachers, people from the community ask these kids questions. So it could be, what's your favorite superhero? My answer a question, or it could be a leadership question. So it teaches them, those, like I said, and she was really good, and we had fun time. So there was probably like 10 of us there. So you guys should go.
Yeah.
The next one is going to be, I just forgot. Where the next one gonna be? 2 weeks from Tuesday. But it's going to be at, well, it'll be in your, it'll be newsletter, so check in the letter, so.
Thank you. Just a reminder, check the newsletter, we can't go through every single announcement every time here, and we're run out of time for our speakers. And there's not a personal note or question, anybody where they can look, one day this weekend, see me after the meeting. So at this time, I'd like Kenton to come introduce our speaker. Kenton. Thank you.
You would think I would remember to stand here last week, because this is where Zoom is seeing you. There's about a half dozen people on Zoom. I normally moderate the Zooms, and I was walking around all over there, so is that, sorry. And hold the microphone in the right place, so, it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, but before that, a little public service announcement. For all of those of you telling me you floss religiously, last week was Easter, so hit it at least twice a year, okay? So, otherwise, you'll have to go to the dentist at the worst time. You know, the worst time to go to the dentist. 2:30. Yeah, work on that one a little bit. All right, so the only time to go to the dentist is. So it's a real pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today. I'm not sure how we met. We came across each other somewhere in the community, in the airway community. But I've had Elizabeth speak to our study club, and then I refer patients all the time because she has a particular skill you're going to learn about today that can really make a difference. She's a graduate of Carnegie Mellon University at the University of Pittsburgh and earned her master's in social work from the University of Pittsburgh Graduate School of Social Work. She spent 15 years working for the Department of Public Affairs, treating PTSD and insomnia disorders, first in DC and then here in Fayetteville. And were you at Walter Reed? So,
Yeah. Washington DC.
yes, gotcha. So working with, soldiers experiencing significant PTSDs and making, incredible life-changing things for them. So she's a member of the Society of Behavioral Sleep Medicine, and is listed on the University of Pennsylvania Perelman School of Medicine CBTI directory. While working at the VA, she became convinced of the power of good sleep to restore mental and physical well-being. She has become a master trainer in CBTI as well. So it's oftentimes to get CBTI outside of the Veterans Administration training. So she's trying to bring that to a wider audience. She's a licensed clinical social worker with over 30 years of experience in medical and mental health. And she's an adjunct professor at the Alice Walton School of Medicine. And thankfully, she's the owner of True Sleep, LLC, which is her practice that you can actually visit with her. And if you're having some issues with CBTI. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Please welcome Elizabeth.
Okay. Gosh, this is such an honor. I actually was a recipient of a Rotary Club scholarship to go to college. I grew up in Virginia. Yeah, so this is really special for me, just even seeing that. I thought, oh my gosh, I really credit the Rotary Club for my ability to go, to a school that I otherwise would not have been able to afford. So I think what you're doing here is really incredible, and it's such an honor to have been invited. I'm really excited to be here. I am really passionate about sleep. When I was at the VA for so many years, managing an outpatient PTSD program. And of course, we had thousands of combat veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. But as I was learning more about what they were suffering from, we were seeing, large amounts, like a high volume of insomnia in veterans with PTSD. And we've known for years, right, that if you have depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, you're very likely to have a secondary diagnosis of insomnia disorder. What's interesting about that, though, is that when we treat PTSD, depression, and anxiety with a really good evidence-based therapy for that disorder, we get a reduction in PTSD, depression, and anxiety symptoms, but we weren't with the insomnia. The insomnia was not improving. And so the VA and the Department of Defense were really concerned about that because especially with the suicide rate amongst veterans, we knew there was a strong association between insomnia and suicide. So around that time, this must have been in the early 2000s, maybe, the VA and the Department of Defense started conducting research about CBT for insomnia, and how this relatively short, fairly easy treatment was such a game changer when it came to improving insomnia symptoms. So around the time I was at the VA, really focused on PTSD, they said, who wants to get treated in CBT for insomnia? And I signed up to do that. And I was really blown away in my clinic in DC because there was like a 6 to 8 to 12 week delay to start your trauma treatment. And I knew a lot of these veterans were, having daily suicidal ideation. I started just screening using an insomnia severity index. It's a really simple measure. And anyone who met criteria for insomnia, I would put them into one of my groups and do CBT for insomnia in a group format. And of course, it being the VA, we collect data at every session, right? And what was astounding was 3-4 weeks in, people who had really high rates of suicidal ideation no longer had suicidal ideation. And what we realized was even when and this was sort of the most astounding data that's been backed up since in lots of peer-reviewed research studies, is that if we actually successfully treated the insomnia, it unlike treating the PTSD first, treating the insomnia first often resolved some of the PTSD, depression, and anxiety symptoms. So sleep is really important. And one of the ways to sort of think about that is, why would evolution preserve us being asleep or unconscious for a third of our lives, right? Like, it doesn't make any biological sense. We are unconscious for that long. And researchers have known that for a long time. Like, gosh, something really important must be happening during sleep. It must be more than just, sedation. And we now know that sleep is a really active process. So a lot of kind of incredible things are happening for our brains and our bodies when we sleep. And so it makes sense that when we improve sleep, we see a whole cascade of other things improve. Realize, where's my screen? There we go. Okay. Okay. So yeah, this is a quote that I think captures that. If sleep doesn't serve a very vital function, it's the biggest mistake evolution ever made. I mean, when we're sleeping, we can't protect our cave from, invaders, right? We can't earn money. Like, why over time do we continue? Is there this biological demand that we be asleep? This is some of the impact of insomnia on physical health. And I know Dr. Ross spoke some about this last week, but of course, cardiovascular risks, chronic insomnia is associated with increased hypertension, inflammation, higher risk of coronary heart disease and stroke, metabolic and endocrine effects. Insomnia disrupts glucose. Many times people that complain of poor sleep or insomnia will also struggle with their weight, because even the hormones that tell you I'm full or I'm hungry get dysregulated when you don't get adequate sleep. So increased cortisol, decreased insulin sensitivity, increased risk of type 2 diabetes and weight gain. We also know, and you probably know this just from your own experience, that poor sleep affects your immune system, right? Have you ever had a time where you weren't sleeping well and you get like a common cold that you should be able to knock out in 3 or 4 days, and you're like, why is this lasting for 3 weeks, right? And oftentimes it's tied to sleep, especially non-REM 3/4 sleep, the deepest stage of sleep. That's where our immune system launches a really robust defense. Our bodies are incredibly sophisticated. We are designed in a way that the body is always working behind the scenes to take care of itself. And that's one of the functions of non-REM 3/4 sleep. We also see this with pain and somatic symptoms. The volume of clients I have who have chronic pain and insomnia is astounding to me. And I spend a lot of time explaining to them, once we improve your sleep, your perception of your pain is going to decrease, right? Because it reduces inflammation. Some of the impact of insomnia on mental health. We know insomnia is a strong risk factor for depression and anxiety, often preceding their onset. This is also true for serious mental illness. There's some fascinating research showing that you can see in the on a polysomnogram data, you can see signs of what's to become bipolar disorder or schizophrenia years in advance of those symptoms coming to fruition. We can see that in the brain as evidenced by sleep patterns. Emotion dysregulation, chronic sleep loss impairs emotion regulation. I always tell clients, I know if I have to get up early for like a flight or something, like a 4 a.m. wake time or 3 a.m. wake time, I know that day I'm gonna cry about something, like I'm gonna cry in the airport when the Folgers commercial comes on, right? Like something that would never make me cry, but I think some of you may have had that experience when your REM sleep gets disrupted, you feel sort of emotionally more vulnerable the next day. And for many people, that manifests itself as more irritability, reduced stress tolerance. Insomnia also affects attention and working memory and executive functioning. It can cause you to ruminate more the next day or to feel like something's exceptionally serious. Whereas if you had had a night of good sleep, you'd be like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. I forgot to return that email, right? After a night of poor sleep, you're like, how could I have done that? I've got to remember to do that, right? What's wrong with me? Like a whole cascade of negative internal dialogue. And of course, at the VA, persistent insomnia is independently associated with increased suicidal ideation and behaviors, to the point that CBT for insomnia is actually considered one of the most effective therapies available for people with chronic suicidal ideation. And we have a set of clinical practice guidelines for suicidal ideation and insomnia, and CBTI is at the top of the list for those disorders. When I meet with clients, I'm always trying to sort of map out the development of their insomnia, because chronic insomnia doesn't just happen overnight. We have what's called a 3P model, where there are some predisposing factors for insomnia. We know there are genetic factors that contribute to insomnia. So if you had a mom or a dad that had insomnia, you're more likely to develop insomnia yourself. But we also know there are some sort of familial factors, and those are messages that you get about sleep while you're growing up. So if you had a family member a mom or dad at the breakfast table say, oh, today's going to be really awful, I slept poorly last night. As a child, you're going to think, oh, how tomorrow goes is dependent on last night's sleep, right? That's a belief that insomniacs hold, that people who don't have insomnia don't believe that, right? They think, the day's going to bring whatever it's going to bring. The day's sort of like the weather, right? People with insomnia have a belief, I'm responsible for how much sleep I get, and how well I sleep, determines the next day. If you also have had a mother, father, or grandparent, or teacher even that says, hey, tomorrow's a big day, get a good night's sleep, right? The message to you in that is going to be, I'm responsible, right? I'm in charge of how much sleep I get. I remind patients probably 15 times a day, sleep is an involuntary physiological process. If I said to you, okay, everybody, can you give me a few minutes while I focus on digesting my lunch, right? And I made you all be quiet. You would say, Elspeth, that's a little wacky. Like your body does that for you. We intuitively just know that, right? Sleep is the same way. I mean, even if I said, here's $1,000 I'm going to give you if you can fall asleep immediately, most people can't fall asleep on demand. They might be able to if they have untreated obstructive sleep apnea. So I don't want to make that bet with anybody that has untreated sleep apnea. But there are also some psychological influences. It's really interesting because I have a feeling I'm in a room full of high achievers. And that's what my practice is made up of. Like I have yet to meet a lazy insomniac. People who have insomnia tend to be like real go-getters. They're the people that you want to call if you have an emergency. They're great problem solvers. But that's actually the thing that contributes to their poor sleep, because when they sleep poorly, they start thinking, oh, this is a problem I must solve. They're also very results-oriented people, so they believe the more effort I put forth to solve this problem, I should get results. And that's true in almost every area of our life, right? Like if there's a job I want to apply to, if I really polish my resume and I buy a nice suit and I practice, I'm in the interview, right? The effort I put forth is more likely to yield results. With insomnia, it's often the opposite. So a lot of what I do is teaching people how to set the stage for good sleep, but then being willing to walk away and be less invested in the outcome, because that's when our sleep system really rises to the occasion. So along with predisposing factors, there are some precipitating factors. These are usually like big life events that cause you to have temporary or what we call acute insomnia. These can be things, so much of my career was taught.
I'm in the Rotary.
Oh, I think that might be someone on the
On Zoom.
on Zoom. Okay.
Hey, go on mute over there, would you?
But people who after like a combat tour would come back, right? And in readjusting to civilian life, they would have difficulty sleeping. And many of the people I treated had trouble sleeping because something very bad had happened at night. So then the brain sort of pairs nighttime with trauma, with a danger, right? But even that is very amenable to CBT for insomnia because we can unpair the association of night and sleep with danger. Sometimes the precipitating factor is something good, like getting married or starting a new job or moving to a new town. Or I did an intake yesterday with a woman whose daughter left for college and she was thrilled for her, right? But she had some anxiety about it. But just the big life transition caused her to have some short-term acute insomnia. The problem with that was she then went to see her doctor who prescribed a sedative hypnotic for sleep, which now she's been on for many, many years. Her daughter's graduated from college, is thriving, but she still feels like I now cannot sleep without this medication. So there's lots of different precipitating factors. It's what we do in response to short-term acute insomnia that determines whether it will go on to become chronic insomnia or not. And that's what is composed of these perpetuating factors. So somebody starts having very rigid sleep rules. Like I'll have clients say to me, oh, if I miss the first wave of sleepiness, game over, I'm up all night, right? Like, so a belief like there's a certain opportunity, almost like jumping rope. And if I don't jump in right at that time, I'm going to miss the opportunity for sleep. The reason why taking sleep medication is a perpetuating factor is that, I work a lot with people that take away the shame of taking a sleep medication because it actually makes total logical sense. If you are not sleeping for an extended period of time and you feel like I'm going to lose my mind, I can't function, I'm getting depressed, I'm getting anxious, and then a doctor prescribes a medication and the first night you take it, you sleep, any rational person is going to say, yeah, I'm going to outsource this to the medication, right? My body's sort of failing at its job. Of course, I'm going to take the medication. So there's a lot of psychological dependency with the medication. And the way that we prescribe these medications, doctors will prescribe it to people as needed, right? Take your Ambien or your Lunesta as needed. The problem with that is if you have insomnia, even thinking about, do I take it? Do I not take it? Do I take it? Do I not take it? Provokes enough anxiety every night that you're going to be unable to sleep if you don't take it, right? So what I do is I work with people's prescribers to say, we're going to have just designated sedative hypnotic nights, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, where these are the nights I take my medication. That actually decreases anxiety. And then the night you don't take the medication, you're able to say to yourself, I only have to make it this one night. If I don't sleep well, that's fine because tomorrow is an Ambien night. And what happens, it's sort of magical. I tell people, you are going to sleep one night on the no Ambien night. It may not be 7 hours, it may only be 4 hours, but it's going to change your mind. It's going to, crush this belief that you have that you cannot sleep without the medication. And the minute that happens, I always tell people to text me in the morning when it happens because I get so excited. But someone texted me this morning and they said, I slept for 6 hours on a no Ambien night and I'm ready to start tapering, right? Like it breaks sort of that cycle for them. Having a lot of pre-sleep anticipatory anxiety is also a perpetuating factor. And then what we call conditioned arousal to the bed. You all have probably heard of that Pavlov's dog experiment where the researcher would ring a bell and introduce meat powder to a dog. And I guess meat powder tastes delicious because the dog would get really excited and would salivate. And the researcher did this again and again and again. And the dog would salivate in response to the meat powder and then eat the meat powder. And then the researcher withdrew the meat powder, but would just ring the bell. And what was fascinating, this was like the first study in classical conditioning, was that even in the absence of the meat powder, the dog would continue to salivate in response to the bell, but would also produce the exact enzymes needed to digest the meat powder he wasn't even going to be getting anymore, right? And that showed how strongly our brains pair things, right? Peanut butter and jelly, right? Movies and popcorn. But the same is true of tossing and turning, being a cue for anxiety. So for many of the people I see, the bed represents anxiety, stress, right? A guy, he's not even a veteran, but he took a photo of his bed one time and he said, "This is my Vietnam. Like, I dread going to bed every night because it's a source of struggle," right? And that's the cycle of insomnia and what happens to people. So the architecture of sleep is really fascinating. I mentioned it does learning, memory, creativity, emotion regulation, but sleep is also reactive based on the demands of the day. So whatever happens to you today, in the absence of taking a medication that alters the architecture of your sleep, your brain is so sophisticated that when you go to bed tonight, it's going to say, okay, you're fighting a little bit of a respiratory infection. I want to do a deeper dive into non-REM 3/4 to send some white blood cells to fight off that respiratory infection. I also want to release some killer T cells to search for any malignancies in your body. You learned so much at, Elspeth's fantastic lecture today. I want to move all of these short-term memory, things in storage over to long-term memory. And I want to trash, memories that I don't need to hold on to. So I've cleared off the thumb drive of my memory bank for tomorrow, so no new learning can take place. So your brain does a really calculated sort of, scan and says, I'm going to try to capture exactly the kind of sleep that you need tonight for your physical and cognitive functioning. And when people understand that, that also helps them say, well, do I really want to take medication that's going to mess around with this? Like, this is a pretty sophisticated system. This is what our sleep cycle looks like. I'm going to see if I can do the pointer. Is this the? Oh yeah, here. Okay, so imagine that your sleep is like a big Olympic-sized swimming pool. And sleep is divided into two stages. There's REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep. You all probably know about that. That's when we do the bulk of our dreaming. And then non-REM sleep. Non-REM sleep is composed of 4 stages: non-REM 1, non-REM 2, and then non-REM 3/4. 3/4 I sort of couple together because they're very similar. But if you imagine this big Olympic-sized swimming pool that you are diving into at night, and you're spending various amounts of time at different levels of the pool, when you first fall asleep, you are hanging out for a little while in non-REM 1. That's a stage of sleep where your brain waves look very much like an awake brain. And often people have sleep state misperception during that time, where they think that they're awake, but they're actually asleep. And they'll often, this was the time of night where somebody might, your spouse might start to snore, and you poke them and say, "You're snoring." Well, I'm wide awake, but they're actually in non-REM 1 sleep. Then you move into non-REM 2. Think of non-REM 2 as the stage of sleep where you're preparing for deep sea diving. You're putting on all of your equipment, right? Your heart rate's dropping, your blood pressure's dropping, your body temperature's dropping. You're getting ready to dive into the deepest stages of sleep. And then that takes place during this non-REM 4. This is when your immune system is launching that defense. Another really critical thing happening during non-REM 3/4 is that's the time of night where our brain is sweeping away amyloid deposits that might contribute to dementia. So we know getting adequate non-REM 3/4 is really important. But look again at how sophisticated the body is. So you can see the brain will say, I don't know how long you're going to sleep. if you only sleep from 10 until 2:30, I'm gonna make sure you spend that if you not go into the deep level of the pool, non-REM before the first half of the night. And then if we have the bonus that we sleep in longer, time in REM to do memory consolidation and emotion regulation. But the body always chooses what is critical for survival first, right? So it says, we're not going to mess around. I mean, it's great to consolidate memories and work on your emotions, but if we need to fight a respiratory virus, we've got to dive deep first things first, which I think is pretty amazing. Your sleep system is composed of two separate systems that work together. One is your sleep drive. Your sleep drive is like your hunger for sleep. And one of the biggest things that I see is that a lot of us are walking around expecting to feel really rested all the time. And we're not really meant to do that. Like, we're meant to build up a sense of tiredness as the day goes on. And that's not a bad thing. It's just like if you wanted to be hungry before you sat down for this lunch, right? And then eating this lunch satisfied your hunger, right? Sleep is the same way. If you're completely rested up until bedtime, you can't build up enough of a sleep drive, right? So when someone calls me and says, I'm really dragging, this is awful, we change the thought of that as, this is fantastic, I'm building up my sleep drive, right? I mean, if you go to the gym and you lift weights and your muscles ache the next day, most of us don't say, well, that seems like a mistake, I should not go back there again, right? Like, we know, oh, that's evidence of me working hard in a certain direction. And it's the same with our sleep. We also have a circadian clock, which is an inborn, like all of us have sort of a chronotype. We're morning people, morning larks, evening owls, or intermediate types. But we have a circadian rhythm that is very sensitive to light exposure, the timing and regularity of meals, and there are things that you can do to strengthen your circadian clock. One of the biggest things is natural light exposure, even on a day that's overcast, getting sunlight exposure, no sunglasses on, letting natural light hit the retina of your eye sends a message to the pineal gland in your brain, and it sets off a whole cascade of wakefulness. I also treat patients that have delayed sleep phase syndrome, where their whole circadian rhythm is pushed forward dramatically. And I actually use glasses, like circadian rhythm glasses, that direct light right to the retina of their eye to gradually shift their circadian rhythm back. Along with like baby doses of melatonin is helpful for that. But most of us walking around do not need melatonin. We have plenty of circulating melatonin in our systems. So I think I might skip this slide. The only important part of this is adenosine is something that accumulates in your brain, and you want your adenosine to be at peak levels at night in order to sleep. Caffeine binds to adenosine and it holds it back like a firewall. So it's completely fine to front load your caffeine, to have caffeine early in the day. But most of us should stop caffeine consumption by about 1 p.m. because the half-life of caffeine is quite long. And you want adenosine levels to be at their peak at night when you're ready for sleep. So caffeine can be your best friend in the morning and before lunch, but after you might want to. I see people like drink your tea right now. You've got 5 minutes to get it in. Some of the factors that weaken the sleep drive: spending too much time in bed. A lot of us, when we sleep poorly, we say, well, I better get in bed early tonight, right? I better give myself more opportunity to sleep. That's the worst thing you can do. And the analogy I give is, if you stretch pizza dough out too thin, you get holes in it, right? So people that spend too much time in bed have multiple middle of the nighttime awakenings, and they often have a long latency to fall asleep. It takes them too long to fall asleep. So keeping your time in bed very narrow is a key thing. You also want to avoid napping close to bedtime. And people that sleep in after a night of poor sleep, or I treat a lot of college students who will get up early for class Monday through Friday, and then on the weekend they sleep till 2 or 3 in the afternoon. It's insane. And I'm like, it's like you're traveling to another time zone and you're giving yourself jet lag every day because Sunday night you can't go to sleep, right? It's going to take you a week to even get your circadian rhythm back on schedule. Okay, so I'm gonna skip through some of these. So along with having a strong sleep drive, so I always tell people the recipe for good sleep is a strong sleep drive, so being really hungry for sleep, a strong and properly placed circadian rhythm. But the third thing, and this is the thing that is like the most problematic for people, is low arousal. And by arousal, I mean cognitive arousal, like how easy is it for me to let go of my thinking at night, and sort of quiet down my thoughts, and physiological arousal, which is how easy is it for me to elicit a relaxation response. Most people with insomnia have a lot of difficulty doing that. And that leads back to the fact that most people with insomnia are high achieving type of people. They're people that have active brains, right? And they have stuff to do tomorrow, right? They, and they want to get things done, right? They don't want to have a bad night's sleep. They don't want to have a day where they're less productive. So that leads to that feeling of being kind of really tired but wired. Our arousal system is really primitive. Like it has to do right at the very top of your brainstem. There's a really like a tiny almond-shaped gland called your amygdala. And your amygdala controls your fight or flight response. And so most of the veterans I treated with PTSD and insomnia had actually enlarged amygdalas. We could see that on functional MRI scans where they had so much blood flow to their amygdala over time that it actually increased in mass. There are things we can do to cool down the amygdala by promoting a relaxation response, cognitive restructuring, like changing the way that you think about things. But I do a lot of training with people to help elicit a relaxation response as well. I think I kind of covered all of this. These are some of the goals of CBTI. These are just some quick and easy things you could, if any of you happen to struggle with sleep, statistically, probably 40% of you do, just based on the numbers, but minimizing nighttime noise, minimizing light exposure at night. I'm a big fan of sleep masks. I think I've got a collection of 6 or 7, and I travel with them and I wear them all the time. Even when your eyes are closed, any ambient light is going to, affect, like set off sort of an alert in your brain. Sound machines are fantastic also if you're really sensitive to sound. Increasing daytime light exposure. The best thing you can do if you slept poorly last night is take a 15-minute walk with no sunglasses on. You will notice an hour or so later that you feel more alert. You also will feel more alert just naturally as the day goes on, because as your body temperature rises, you're going to feel more alert. So if somebody calls me and says, oh my gosh, I'm miserable, I'm really dragging, last night was so hard, I'll say, hey, let's check back in around 3 and let's see if your body temperature has risen and you feel more alert. One reason we feel fatigued after lunch, we always attribute that to eating, but it's actually, for most of us, our body temperature drops because of the way our circadian rhythm affects our body temperature. We have a slight dip in our body temperature after lunch, and that's what causes that fatigue after lunch. It has nothing to do with the eating. Limiting daytime naps to less than 1 nap, implementing a wind down time before bed. You can't stop a moving car by just slamming on the brakes. So if you're running around answering emails, folding laundry, doing a million things, and then you hop into bed with the expectation of sleep, it's not going to work that way. So these are just some quick things. And I won't go over this because I don't think it's necessary, but this is my contact information and feel free to email me or call me at that number. And do we have time for questions? Did I use up the whole 30 minutes? I probably did. So please do email me if you have questions and I will do my best to email you back. And if there's more than one question where people want it to be made public, I can share it with Dr. Ross and he can get it to you all.
Could we do the quick and easy slide one more?
Yeah, of course. Sure. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I have a little something to give you. This is, it's my pleasure to give you a little token for your, from our club. It's a rampaging raid back on a Rotary wheel. I'm not going to copy these here today. So I'm going to play that proudly on your desk. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. This meeting is adjourned.
Yeah.
Every single one. See you, everyone. It's a member. Doesn't matter. Did you see me?